Time for Jeremy Corbyn's Ask Me Anything round. Yvette Cooper, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, Jeremy, you in one of the answers earlier, you were talking about where maybe we would have loads of influence if we were still just in opposition. Look me in the eye and tell me, are you doing this just as part of a protest movement in the Labour Party, or do you want to be a Labour Prime Minister? Is that why you are doing this?
I'm doing this because I want our party to change. I'm doing this because I'm putting myself forward to do the job in order to bring about that change. But I believe in a coherent party. I believe in greater democracy in our party. And if I'm elected to that position, I would want to promote an awful lot of changes to bring about a more collective approach to the way we do things.
But what about being a Labour Prime Minister? What about getting the Labour Party into government? Because you could change the party in all kinds of different directions, and we could be a great protest movement and so on, but we wouldn't actually be able to increase the number of sure starts. We wouldn't actually be able to deal with the tax credits problem.
We would encourage an awful lot more people to register to vote, an awful lot more people to vote. We would bring about a wider electorate, and I think what's interesting in the last election is that we put on 1 million votes in England, we lost some in Wales and a lot in Scotland. We also only had a 47% turnout amongst young people and lower numbers registered. I think we can excite a lot of people if we show that we're not a party that supports austerity, we're not a party that cuts welfare. We are a party about expansion of the economy.
What is it that you want to deliver and what is it that you want to achieve? Because I agree, of course, we've got to grow the party, we've got to do all of these sorts of things, but do you want to be a Labour Prime Minister, honestly?
I want to see this country change, and if I can help in doing that, then I'll do it.
But do you want to be Prime Minister?
Of course, because that's why we're all here. That's why you're here, isn't it?
It certainly is, because I think we've got to get a Labour government elected, otherwise we will be letting people down. We will fail to change the country. We will fail to support a national health service. We will fail to help working people who are having a really hard time, or working families who are just about to be really hard hit.
And if all we offer them for the next 5 years is austerity light, cuts in welfare, and very little else other than appearing to be approved of by certain quite right-wing newspapers, it doesn't bode well. It doesn't excite people. This Tory government is very, very ideological in what it's doing.
They are.
Very ideological. We are accepting too much of what they're saying and too much of what they're doing.
Jeremy, what qualifies you to be Prime Minister? You've never run anything. You've never run a union. You've never run a council.
You've been misreading what was miswritten in some of the papers today.
What have you run then?
Well, before I became a Member of Parliament, I was a councillor for 10 years in the borough of Haringey.
Did you hold any office?
Can I finish, if you don't mind, my friend?
Were you leader?
I was chair of a number of committees. I was secretary of the Labour group.
But you weren't leader of the council?
No, I wasn't leader of the council.
You haven't actually run a council?
Well, I was chair of the planning committee. I was chair of the public works committee. I managed a very large budget in local authority terms on public works. I created a lot of apprenticeships when I was doing it. This was in 1978, so it would have been a few 100,000 at that time.
But I mean, the fact that you haven't run anything since 1978, I mean, shows a distinct lack of ambition, wouldn't you say?
What is ambition? Is it to control things, or is it to change things?
You went into national politics in 1983. As far as I'm aware, you've never held a shadow position. You've never been a minister, and yet you now somehow think you can convince the electorate that you should be Prime Minister.
I was also a union official for 10 years, negotiating on behalf of... I was direct negotiating secretary for 40,000 workers in London at that time.
That qualifies you to be Prime Minister, doesn't it?
That was a huge responsibility. I've been a Member of Parliament for 32 years, representing the same area all that time. Does it mean we all have the right skill set? The four of us around here, do we all have the right skill set to do everything? Probably not.
Okay.
But I do think you have to have some idea of the direction you want to take this country, some idea particularly of the direction we want our party to go. We have lost our way as a party.
Liz Kendall, your question to Jeremy.
Do you think that we should get rid of the deficit this Parliament?
I think we've set an arbitrary date for reducing the deficit. I think that is a big mistake, and that's why we're having such massive cuts. I think we should set a later date to remove and reduce the deficit in order that we can at least 20, if not later than that, in order to ensure there is sufficient and proper funding, particularly for welfare and local government, because at the moment we are slicing apart an awful lot of our local services.
So just to clarify, did you mean by 2020 or 20 years?
No, at the moment, the Osborne plan is to reduce it before the end of this Parliament. I would put a later date on it, but it also depends on the level of economic growth. Every time George Osborne says it's going to be 5 years' time, he moves for another 5 years. So what we inherit in 2020 will probably be maybe a smaller deficit than there is now, but is it the end of the world to have a deficit when you've got a lot of people who are suffering? Surely
but that's the truth, isn't it? No, you would actually run a deficit forever. You never really want to balance the books, do you?
I want to ensure that we have a country of full employment. We don't have a country where many people are destitute.
We have the lowest unemployment in any major economy at the moment. I mean, if your policies are being implemented in France and they have an unemployment rate double ours.
I'm not sure my policies are being implemented in France, but
they're closer to France than they are to George Osborne.
The point I made at the beginning, and the point I would make again, is that the levels of wages in this country are low. The numbers of people on flexible working, often 0 hours contract, is very high, and the levels of child poverty in Britain are an utter disgrace for the fourth richest country in the world. Surely government is about dealing with the poorest as well as other people in society.
Andy Burnham.
Easy one here, Jeremy. We both want a Labour government. What I want to know is, how will you win back those people who voted Labour in 97 but Tory in 2015?
Point out to them that a Labour government ensuring there is a fully functioning health service free at the point of use as a human right, not one that's rationed, is available for all, an adult social care service that's available for all, a housing policy that provides sufficient council housing to ensure that the levels of homelessness and overcrowding have gone, and point out to those people that they might themselves be relatively well off, but they all know somebody that has a mental health condition. They all know somebody that's going to get into difficulties in life. A cohesive society. I think we can build that trust and build that sense of unity.
On the 7th of July, I was in Scotland at the Gleneagles Hotel, where we were having the major international summit, the G8 summit. And this was literally the day after we'd